Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to see so many of you out here tonight. My name's Wayne Anthony. I'm on the steering committee of the CCPA Manitoba. First off, we acknowledge that we are broadcasting today from Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The hydroelectricity that's powering our computers is generated in Treaty 5 territory. The water that sustains us comes from Treaty 3 territory. As treaty people, we acknowledge the damage of the past and the present and commit to working in meaningful partnership with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. To start our evening, I'd like to ask Leslie Spillett, Tasha's mother, a longtime advocate and elder, to do a blessing for us. Leslie?
Same regrets to you for introducing me, Wayne. And to again, Molly, just to let you know, I was really touched by your words in that card, and I say miigwech for the tobacco. So I was wondering it's always nice to be on a call or at a meeting when we're together with Tasha and everyone. And I was thinking earlier today about what I might say as a few words. And I remember, like in the 70s, I came to Winnipeg from northern Manitoba in 1977. And I happened to have had the amazing opportunity to meet a woman by the name of Millie Lamb early in almost as soon as I got here, because I worked on Joe Zukin's mayoral campaign. That was one of the first things I did. And I met Millie through those connections. And Millie was a brilliant writer, and she could turn so many things that were kind of current, popular at the time into change the words up and make them absolutely brilliant and revolutionary. And she had written this play about Nellie McClung. And we performed it all over Western Canada. Of course, we know Nellie now as a maybe a various, she was complex, of course, and she wasn't always, she was an anti-racist ally. Let's put it that way. But in this play, it was really around the right for settler women to win the vote. And one of the lines from the play came up, and from Roblin, a Premier Roblin at the time, and he said when the quote, and I think this is a historical quote. He said, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." And of course, we know that is just absolutely not the case. It does not work that way, just because of all the how oppression intersects and replicates itself. But I was thinking also around comparing, an Indigenous worldview on women and participating as really an integral part of, like, all women in the community, an integral part of raising up children to be strong, intelligent, independent, kind, generous, all those good values that we want. And I think that there is something in, we know that there is, mothers and raising children is a pretty influential relationship. And I think that we see each other in such, families we're only, really need to love our own children and want our own children to succeed. But in an Indigenous worldview, that we're all supposed to love our children, And I think that in the work that we do in our organizations and in our homes and in our communities, you know, being challenging those systems of oppression are uh, is one of the way those values show up. And so I always appreciate people who question the status quo, to question power relationships and power dynamics, and want to bring those systems down. And and so, you know, I know that I was offered tobacco, and I will put tobacco out in a good way, and to just to ask all of our ancestors, because you know I know that they all had a hand in creating the human beings that you are, that fight for social justice, social change, and creating a world that all of our children, in the very wise words of Tasha, creating a world where all that's worthy of our children. So those ancestors, including Millie Lamb, I know she's creating problems and challenging unjust injustice wherever she is, and just to watch over us tonight and keep us safe, and that we see the beauty in the life that we've been given, and also not it's not only about the challenges that we have, but the beauty that we create as well. So with that, I wanted to say how excited I am to spend this time with you. So Nidinaway Maganaduk, I greet you as my relations. Miigwech.
Thanks very much, Leslie. That's a wonderful start to tonight. This is the second event in the second season of CCPA's Speaking Up series. There'll be 2 more conversations over the next 3 months. First, I want to thank everyone who worked to put our event together tonight, especially Molly, Karen, and Andre, and our presenter tonight, Tasha Spillett. Speaking Up is a series of conversations about a better and socially just future, organized by the CCPA Manitoba. Our intention is to bring together CCPA supporters and others to talk about how we can create a socially just and non-oppressive future. Please check out our website at www.policyalternatives.ca to find out all of the kinds of activities that we do. And if you can, please support us with a donation. The CCPA and the social justice research that we do depends completely and so much on the support of people like you. There'll be a link to doing the donating in the chat. And as well, in the chat, there'll be a link to sign up for our newsletter and our fast facts. Just before we start, I want everyone to know that we are recording the presentation part of the evening. It'll be available on CCPA's YouTube channel, and we'll provide a link to the YouTube channel in an email follow-up after tonight. If you're all comfortable doing so, we'd encourage you to keep your cameras on for the whole event. And how we're sort of see the night going. In the past, when we did our first season of Speaking Up, or only part of it actually, we couldn't do the whole thing, we did it at XQ's on Sargent. It was a great venue, perfect for the kind of thing that we're trying to do, but we have to be virtual now. We're going to try to replicate being together in a single place as best we can, and we're kind of learning how to do that as we do this. First of all, Tasha will speak to us for about 25 or 30 minutes, and then we'll take a break for about 10 minutes or so, where you can speak amongst yourselves at some tables that Andre will set up. And at XQ's during that break, we would also, there was one time we had some cupcakes that somebody brought, and another time we had some pizza, you know, and we had some coffee and tea and other things such like that. And so we encourage you to try to do the same tonight during the break. We'll reconvene in this room for a further conversation with Tasha for about 30 minutes. And Molly McCracken, our executive director, will host that part of the evening. So for tonight's conversation, leading that conversation is Tasha Spillett. Thanks so much for coming out, Tasha, and doing this. Tasha is an Afro-Indigenous woman who became a mother at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Land Back movement, and then the COVID-19 pandemic. That's quite a combination to become a mother. In her time with us, she'll reflect on becoming a parent as the world around us continues to shift. Tasha will be sharing her experience of becoming a first-time parent, and her presentation will focus on Indigenous knowledges connected to parenting and parenting in the midst of today's political climate. Before we start, are we doing the poll again, Andre? There's going to be a little poll that we ask you all to answer so we get a sense of where everyone is when it comes to the issues of parenting during a pandemic. And so now I'll turn it over to Tasha.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see your little boxes, your little Brady Bunch boxes. I appreciate being able to see faces of people outside of my home. Thank you to Wayne, Molly, Karen, and Andre. Especially, I'm just so amazed by Andre's technical skills. I'm very impressed and thankful that you are in that seat for this evening, because it will go a lot smoother than if I were in that seat. I will say that I'm presenting from my mudroom because my baby is sleeping inside the house and the internet is a little bit shifty. So I'm praying that it just stays strong for the time that we have together. I'm just going to jump into my share screen. So, wache wapio mamea squan degasun wapi masquan dodam. I just gave you a lot of information about myself, about the people that I come from, the nation that I come from, the land base that we're connected to, and all of the relationships that hold these things together. And so it's important for me to situate myself as a person and as a person of the land base that I come from, as a means to pay respect to the people that I come from, but also to honor that I am accountable to those people. So I really feel like relational accountability is so important because it ensures that we govern ourselves in ways that honor our people and our nations. And so I always keep that at the forefront of the things that I do. And then it's also good to know that, like, should I speak out of turn or should I say something problematic, that the aunties that have taught me, my mother, can also guide me in a better direction. So congratulations, we are a year into this pandemic and we've made it this far. I think that although it might seem counterintuitive, that we are owed a congratulations, because the things that we have done, the pivoting that we have done, the things that we have sacrificed are great. We know that we've given up a lot and we've learned a lot in the past year, and I think that we should celebrate our resolve. We should celebrate our innovation, our creativity, our ability to make sense of things when they don't make very much sense at all. So you're looking at my quarantine. This is my baby Isabella Gishigo, and my husband Leonard Sumner. And I've spent the past 365 plus days at home with these two people, learning and growing together, learning how to be a parent, learning how to be a family for the first time. When one of my mentors, her name is Diane Miller, when I first told her, she was on my PhD committee. When I told her I was pregnant with Isabella, or when I told her Isabella was born, she said, you'll come out of this with an unbelievable closeness. And that's one of the things that I hold on to, is that we've literally spent each and every day getting to know this little girl and becoming a family. I mean, it's not perfect all the time. Can you imagine spending 365 plus days, 24/7 in a house with two people? But we do our best. So when I chose to become pregnant, I was actually, my mom and I did a presentation a couple of days ago now about parenting, about motherhood, and it made me reflect on the time that I was wanting to become a parent. And so before my husband and I became pregnant with Isabella, we took that intention into ceremony to ask for a child. And we did so with tender hearts because just before we conceived our daughter, my husband's mother, also named Isabella, passed away. And so we were grieving at the time, and we had broken hearts. And it was so emotional that just like, about a month after we laid to rest my mother-in-law, we found out that we were pregnant with Isabella, our daughter. And my husband always says, Creator doesn't leave an empty space. And Creator certainly didn't leave an empty space in our life with the loss of his mother, because it was filled with our daughter quite quickly. And I'm so grateful for that. We carry for Indigenous people, we carry the belief or the understanding that it's the children who choose their parents. That in the universe, in the spirit world, that children choose who it is, choose which families they want to enter, choose who they want their parents to be. And as the teaching goes, before a child is born, Creator shows them all that their life will be. Creator shows them all the beautiful things, all of the hardships, and that their very first active agency is to come into their life, is to choose their life for all the good and the bad, and to choose their parents. And so when I reflect back, of course, when I became pregnant with Isabella, I would have never imagined her first year would have been what it was. But I remember, those very first days sitting at home with my brand new baby as the world was kind of crumbling in a way around us, and thinking, why is this happening now? And I remembered that teaching, and it made me think, all the babies who have been born in this time have seen everything, all the days to come ahead, and still chose to come forward. And I really, really held tight to that hope in a kind of hopeless time. I held tight to the knowing that my daughter has seen each and everything that will come in her life, that will come in the days ahead, including all the COVID and all the crazy variants now. And she still said, you know what, I choose this life. I choose these people. I choose this family. And I'm going to come forward. And I really hold that dear in my heart. I hold that as the glimmer of hope when I'm having a really hard day, because, as being a new parent is not easy. But that gives me a sense of strength. So on March 3rd, I gave birth to our daughter. After 36 hours of labor, I always claim each and every hour because I feel like I deserve it. And she came shooting into this world at just after 9 p.m. on March 3rd. And so we stayed in the hospital that night, just holding our perfect, healthy little baby girl. We went home on March 4th, and the snow was like, I just remember coming out of the parking lot at the women's hospital, and the snowflakes were just like heavy and full. And I remember watching them and think, like, this is such a beautiful world. And like literally the sky looked different after having my daughter. It just felt like everything just felt crisper, clearer, more beautiful. And then, you know, the next day we get up with our baby, and our world had changed in our little life, but the expansive world was literally changing each and every moment. And looking back now, I kind of wish I had written a little bit of a diary from the time, but looking back now, I remember feeling like, I'm not sure if anyone on the call can relate, but I remember feeling like it seemed like COVID-19 could knock on our door, grab us by the throat, and kind of like jump down. Like that early information about COVID seemed like it just had these superpowers and was everywhere and could do everything. And I remember feeling very scared. And perhaps it was a little bit of my postpartum hormones combined with these like world changing events. But it made me want to stay, now we use the word, we use the word bubble very freely in our conversations, but at that time it really made me want to just keep our little baby in this protective bubble. And it would be 43 days before I would even leave the front door of our house, because I just felt like I just needed to do everything I could possibly do to keep our baby safe. And looking back now, I think, probably a lot of that was to do with my hormones at the time, and thinking, just thinking like sleep deprivation and anxieties. But on that 44th day, I stepped into our backyard, and I just and I didn't go far. I went like 10 steps into our backyard with our little girl. And that was our first entrance back into the world. So we know that the last summer, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement was also on the rise after the murder of brother George Floyd in what's known as the United States. And so I asked for permission to share this photo from a friend of mine, and this photo was taken in Winnipeg, in front of the ledge at the Black Lives Matter rally, uh, to demand justice for all of the public executions of Black and Brown bodies, but in this specific one, the murder of George Floyd. And I was so stricken by this photo. So what you see is like a baby, and he's wearing a T-shirt that says "I am not a threat." And it kind of it was it hit me hard in the heart, because I knew that my daughter, my daughter will walk through this world as a brown woman, and her people will make targets of her body. And that is such a hard and heartbreaking realization for a mother, because I have the responsibility of arming our daughter for the world, but also to protect her right to experience joy. And what a thing to try to navigate. How do you ensure that your child have all of the tools, the language, the skills to be able to keep themselves safe, but without, you know, inhibiting them from living freely and joyously as they deserve to do? And I have many good role models, my mother, my aunties, my friends who have done this, but it is difficult. And it's definitely a struggle. And so while the rally was happening downtown, I was sitting at home, and poetry is a way that I kind of make sense of the world around me. So I wrote this down. um, it says, I watched from home, moving back and forth in a rocking chair, demands for justice in symphony with the breath of my baby. I watched from home, tears running down my cheeks, bringing out the curls in her hair. So when, being a parent in a pandemic is quite difficult. I've The personal struggles, of course, of not having access to a community of care to raise your child. When I first became pregnant with Isabella, I imagined, and kind of I daydreams and fantasized about the community gatherings, the family gatherings that would be held in Isabella's honor to welcome her to our community, to welcome her to our family. And all of these things wouldn't happen because of the timing of her birth and the pandemic and the health restrictions. And I still grieve these things, but more than my personal struggles with feeling isolated in being a pandemic parent was also not being able to participate with community and community action. So, like you can kind of tell with my mom's opening remarks, being politically engaged was not an like really an option. Wasn't an optional thing provided in our house. It was part of our education, part of our upbringing, right from being small children. So some of my earliest memories are of, being at actions, being at rallies, being at memorials, being at community organizing meetings. Like I was a meeting kid, um, being shuttled from place to place. And so not being able to make community in the way of physically showing up for things like the Black Lives Matter rally, for the we know when Aisha Hudson was murdered by the Winnipeg police, these several losses that keep on rolling in, including the latest heart-wrenching murder of our sister who was pregnant, in Winnipeg this week. Not being able to physically be with our loved ones in their grieving is horrendous. Not being able to show up when we know people need community, when we know people need each other. If like Indigenous people have had so much stolen, but at least we've always had each other, and now we can't physically be there for each other. And so I think that it's especially a hard time. um like I said, it's hard to be at home. It's hard to be at home in times when you know that your community needs you. So this is another piece of writing that I wrote to kind of like move those thoughts and feelings through my body. Parenting in a time of protest doesn't mean you're sitting on the sidelines. The revolution wakes you before the sun comes up. It asks you a million questions a day. The revolution wants kisses for where it hurts and extra cuddles at bedtime. You breastfeed the revolution, tell it stories and sing it songs. The revolution calls you mama. The front lines are wherever our bodies are, and some of our bodies are at home raising the revolution. uh, and motherhood, like coming to the realization that motherhood is a very important part of resistance. It is an active resistance. Raising healthy families, healthy and well children. That the quote circulates throughout social media, to raise children that don't have to heal from their childhood. That is the work of revolutionaries, the work that we do each and every day when we take care of our families. Part of doing what we can do to kind of keep some of our ceremonies tied to pregnancy, birth, and child rearing intact during COVID-19, during the pandemic, has required quite a bit of creativity. And we do the best that we can, because what we know is that um, the land, our songs, our ceremonies need us just as we need them. That our people have always actively participated in our spiritual well-being, and that we have a duty as relatives to those things to keep that relationship living, to keep it moving. And just because we are in isolation doesn't mean we can turn our backs from our responsibilities as relatives. It actually, we should be doing them more to strengthen ourselves during this time. And so we were able to keep some of the ceremonies going for Isabella, and to honor her connection to the earth. So when Isabella was born, of course, a birthing person creates a placenta, that sustains the baby in utero. And after you birth your child, the placenta comes, and it's like a second birth. So for many people, for many Indigenous nations, that placenta is held in high reverence, is sacred. And so you see a picture of my mother, and I'll explain it in a second. But my mother's job, one of her main jobs at our birth was to watch the placenta, because what happens a lot of times in colonial systems is they don't understand our ways of being. And so, like, unfortunately, even though sometimes Indigenous folks or folks in general say that they want to keep the placenta, if there isn't somebody watching out for it can end up in the trash. So my mom watched out for the placenta so that we could take it home with us. And then once the ground was thawed, we returned the placenta to the land. And we did that to honor, to give thanks to the land for sustaining us, and also to honor Isabella's relationship with her own home territory. So we buried Isabella's placenta on my husband's homeland, Little Saskatchewan First Nation. And the placenta is buried actually on the place that we were married, in the summer previous to that. And so we did that for Isabella, but we also did that as a way to protect the land, because Little Saskatchewan First Nation was flooded intentionally, by the government of the government of the day. It was an NDP government who flooded the territory, and it displaced the people. So for Little Saskatchewan, Lake St. Martin, Fairford, and communities in that area, people were displaced from their homelands. But my father-in-law refused to leave. So he was born and raised on this piece of land, and he refused to leave. He stayed in the community and kept the school running throughout the whole evacuation. But INAC has condemned that piece of land. So INAC has decided that land is just it's condemned, and so they won't support any building on that land. So what we do now, as an active resistance, is continue to use or to work with the land through traditional use. And so that, should it be in the future that we need to protect the land, we can show that the land is, the legal terms is our traditional use. So we can show that the land continues to be actively involved in ceremonial protocols. And so Isabella's placenta is buried there. We also put out her belly button. And so the belly button ceremony is about, showing a child, connecting the child to where they belong. So Isabella's belly button is placed at the Petriforms in Bannock Point. And it's kind of like, for Indigenous folks on the call, like, you might have heard grannies and aunties joking. If a child is kind of running around crazy, they might say something like, "Oh, that baby's looking for their belly button." And so the joke is that if the belly button isn't specifically placed in an intentional way, that a child will always like look around, so go walk around kind of aimlessly looking for their belly button. And so I'm just going to wind down here. I look forward to the conversation. But, it was the past 12 months have been so tough for a lot of people. But for people who have welcomed children, or who will welcome children in this time, I think it has been especially difficult, because we were never meant to parent in isolation. Especially for Indigenous folks, we come from communities of expansive kinship systems which are intricately designed to support one another. And so, we ask ourselves, we know that it takes a village to raise a child, but how do we recreate that village during a time of social distancing? Like, we know how important it is to support new parents, to welcome new children, to provide that community of care, but how do we do so in a way where we keep people healthy and safe? And so I offer that, and I thank the organizers for the time, and I look forward to the Q&A after your breakout session. Ego say.
Thank you so much, Tasha Spillett, for that incredibly beautiful and profound presentation and for sharing your thoughts and your family with us tonight. It was just a wonderful presentation. Miigwech for that.